Have you ever had your world turned upside down? If not, it's time. Let's talk about it with Chad Bird on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
We're so glad you're here. I'm Steve, the aforementioned old white guy. I love the book we're going to be talking about because as I get older, ain't nothing what I thought it was. Everything is changing, and I hate change, and I'm irritated because of it. And I'm going to tell Chad that he's got to write another book after this one that will remedy my cynicism.
Good luck.
Yeah, really. I was going to say, what? Poor guy. We need to get him off the air now.
Our resident megachurch pastor, Zach Van Dyke, is
That's
here.
me. I'm here.
Actually, Zach just woke up from his post-Easter sermon nap.
Man, thousands saved. And probably now that it's on the internet, maybe millions even saved. I don't even know.
Yeah.
I love it.
Good work.
And ERIK and ERIK GUZMAN is here.
Oh, we messed that up.
Yeah, we did.
Good.
Do that again.
Do it again.
Yeah, do it again.
ERIK GUZMAN is with us.
And
also
with you.
See, you gotta read. I know.
Stick to the script.
David, you gotta read your lines.
Well, I didn't know I had to read it precisely.
That was worth it, man.
You haven't done that for 20 years, read your lines precisely.
Welcome to my nightmare, Matt.
That's great.
Matthew,
Now Matt's writing the stuff for Steve that Steve doesn't read. I just,
I'm going back to my treehouse.
take a certain amount of satisfaction. I'm not the only one.
Matthew Porter is here.
Doesn't even matter.
Matthew wants everybody to know that the paper we use is recycled, and so are the jokes.
Absolutely right. Absolutely.
Except for the one that didn't come off. That was brand new.
These things happen.
Our producer, JINX, is working hard in the little glass booth. Did you guys know at first JINX didn't like the idea of long hair, but then it grew on him? I am so sorry. This is awful.
I'm taking some time off. Forget it.
This is quality stuff, man. This is quality.
And Cathy is the soft, feminine side of the program. One day she'll retire from here and work in a less stressful job like air traffic controller at O'Hare Airport.
Next week, you're just getting dirty limericks. That's it. I'm done. That's it.
Matt's intro on the show next time.
Oh, goodness.
Man, you
By
think
the way-
Chad's still with us?
I don't know. He's smart. He
Might
left.
be on the road.
Chad Bird is our guest. He has served as a pastor, didn't make it a professor.
That is not in the script.
He blew that.
Matt
And
did
then
not
a
write
lecture, and that didn't work either. So now he's driving a truck. He's written a bunch of books and contributed articles to the Gospel Coalition, Mockingbird, among many others. He writes at chadbird.com. That bird is B-I-R-D. chadbird.com. And his latest book, which I hold in my nicotine-stained fingers, Upside Down Spirituality, the 9 Essential Failures of a Faithful
Why are you holding the book upside
Life.
Because it's upside down.
down? Upside down in his fingers?
No, it's right side up.
You're going to confuse the old guy. Chad.
Why did you come back, Chad?
Yeah, a lot of our guests won't return, but I think you're a brave man.
I'm a glutton for punishment. That's all it is.
Are you still driving a truck, or are you making more money with this writing thing?
Oh no, I'm still driving the truck. Yeah, the pastor thing didn't work out. The professor thing didn't work out. But so far, anyway, I'm still trucking. So until they kick me out of this too, I guess I'm going to keep right on down the road.
Well, are those two of the essential failures, Jen?
Yeah, those first two chapters, right? Yeah, I finally decided I'd write a book about something that I actually knew something about, failure. So there you go. You got it in your hands.
I saw that in the title. I was automatically drawn to it. I'm like, failure? I can do that.
I might be close to done.
Yeah, completely autobiographical.
Hey, I've been looking at the book. You know, you kind of shattering all my stuff that I've been teaching for 85 years. And, you know, I've been preaching this stuff, and all of a sudden I pick up a book, and it says, in effect, Brown, you're wrong. You're really wrong. What do you mean that God doesn't believe in me? Don't I strive for excellence? And what's this drunkenness stuff? Well, we're going to get, where did this come from? You know, it is so you to write a book like this. It's out of the box, and it's profound in the things that you say. What was the genesis of it? Was it just a blog you were writing, or Jesus came in the middle of the night because you had a personal relationship with him, and and revealed to you that you should write this, kind of like Revelation? Where did it come from?
Yeah, well, I've been toying around with an idea of a book somewhat similar to this, and I'd written a couple of articles where I fleshed out one or two of these failures, and from there I just started jotting down a few other topics that I thought would work as far as this upside down approach goes. And before I knew it, I had 9 of them. So there you go. There's the 9 chapters of the book. But I mean, in many ways, the book itself is sort of a condensation of stuff that I've been repeating for the last few years. Almost everything that I write and everything that I teach is in one way or another just an expression of the theology of the cross, which is basically what upside down spirituality is life. It is like it's the Good Friday kind of life in which God reveals who He is and how He's working in our lives in backwards, upside down sorts of ways. So it's kind of like I say, it's sort of a summary of a lot of what I've been pressing forward, I'd say the last at least 4 or 5 years, brought together under the cover of one book.
You're sort of making an obscene gesture at some of the self-help, positive, go just do it kind of teaching in the church. Does that make you angry?
Some of it actually does. I'll encounter this very, very me-centered kind of approach to Christianity, in which Jesus is relegated to a footnote or a PS at the end of the sermon, and all you're hearing is just law upon law upon law, with maybe just a smidgen of grace thrown in, and it really does upset me, because I grew up in a situation similar to that, and I remember that bitter sting of legalism still very well, and I've got a lot of family and friends who are still caught in that, and so anytime that I hear something which is detracting from grace and Christ, and just kind of weighing people down with even more demands, especially those which God Himself doesn't even give us, then I want to do something about it. I want to point people away from all these oughts and shoulds and musts, which are going to do nothing more than accuse them, to where they can actually find some freedom and peace. So you could kind of see this book as a big middle finger to all of that kind of stuff, which directs people away from Christ and just back to themselves.
Don't they kind of need to be set up for failure, though? And isn't the law a big part of that? Like, just give them so many things to do that they think they can do, and then wait for them to blow it miserably so that they can find out the truth.
Yeah, that's basically the way that life works. I was listening to an interview recently. The author was talking about his book, and someone asked him basically, well, so how does one get to that point of being in a low spot in life? And his response was basically, oh, don't worry, you'll get there.
Yeah, right.
It's not like you have to plan this, So next year I'm gonna screw up really big time, or next month I'm gonna do something really bad and mess things up. Well, it's just gonna happen. That's the way it goes, and that's really ultimately where all the laws are leading us, is to realize our impotence and our screwed upness and our need for somebody else to come along and to take care of it completely for us, which, of course, is what the gospel and the work of Christ is all about.
Oh, man, refreshing stuff. And, Eric, what you said was profound. I think you have a higher view. I don't think it was intentional on the part of those teachers that they said, I'm going to lay it on them. And when they can't do it, then they'll turn to God. However, with God, it was intentional. He said, dummy, you can't do this. When you realize you can't do it and you're low enough, then come to me. I won't fix it, but I'll love you, and that'll be enough. Guys, you're going to love this interview with Chad. The name of the book is Upside Down Spirituality. And like Jesus, we're going to return, so don't go anywhere. One of our favorite guests is Chad Bird, and we love having him on. He's kind of like us, and he tells me that scares the spit out of him. But the name of the book is Upside Down Spirituality, 9 Essential Failures of a Faithful Life.
Hey, Chad, you seem to have some things to say about the subject of ambition. Is that bad, or is it just that some of us are ambitious for the wrong things, or what's the deal with that?
And is it ambitious of him to come on this show and
peddle
his book?
Yeah, that's the quintessential ambition right there, coming on this program for sure.
Right.
Yes,
he's achieved so much.
Right. So speak to ambition, okay?
Yeah, so the way I describe it in the book is when we talk about rags to riches stories, and the story of ambition is sort of a vice to virtue story. If you look in almost every bit of literature, secular as well as religious, throughout the last, 20, 25 centuries, going all the way back to the Greeks, ambition was understood as a vice. It was not something that someone was to be complimented for. So if somebody said he has ambition, it was like, oh, well, that's not good. Because ambition was understood as basically living a life for oneself. So you're looking out for number one, and you're really not concerned about anybody else. So you'll do whatever it takes in order to achieve your ambition. But what's happened over the last, 30, 40 years is that ambition has completely turned around. And so now if we say someone's ambitious, it's like understood to be, well, that's great because they're really out to accomplish great things. But what I refer to in that chapter in the New Testament is that when Paul talks about ambition, he's being sarcastic, tongue-in-cheek, as it were, because he'll say, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. So in other words, make it your ambition not to be ambitious. And the reason ambition is at least historically understood, not a good thing, is because it really is. It's not just striving to do great things. It's striving to do great things for yourself. So it's all a me-centered life in which I'll do whatever it takes. I'll push anybody out of the way. I'll do whatever I need to do in order to make sure that I achieve my own goals and dreams, and everybody else be damned, basically. So the New Testament understanding of ambition is that it's not good unless it's completely flipped backwards, turned upside down, to where actually our ambition is not to be ambitious, and instead to, well, just like Jesus says, to be last instead of first, and to be the servant instead of the master. So it's a theology of the cross kind of understanding of what our life is about. I mean, our life is really about getting crucified with Christ so that we die, and which is never a popular thing to do, but it's what the New Testament calls us to. We're to be co-crucified, co-buried, and co-resurrected with Christ, so that not that we achieve what we want, but rather that our achievement is actually a failure to be who we want to be, and instead what we get is death. But on the other side of death, we get life with Christ, so that now who we are is entirely defined by who He is and who He has declared us to be.
Chad, I stepped into, as Steve likes to call it, a mega church, which is not really that mega. But after
when it gets over 10,000,
no,
it's
it's not 10,000. But I stepped into a role that was way bigger than anything I had done before, and you know, I definitely didn't feel qualified. And very early on, there was a discussion about someone needed to talk about something that was difficult. It had something to do, I think, with finances. And somebody said, "Well, let Zach do it. He'll be perfectly adequate." And
that's quite the compliment.
And that it was so freeing, because for the first time I just thought, yeah, I just have to do
That's the bar.
I just have to do my job. Like, I don't have to be a superstar. I don't have to hit it out of the park. Like, I can just do it. And I noticed that your chapter, which I think has a lot to do with the ambition stuff, that you titled, or something like, "What if I just want to be average?" So are you saying, like, it's okay to just be average, just be perfectly adequate, just kind of do what you're called to do, and it doesn't have to be anything more than that?
Yeah, it's extremely freeing, because, I mean, for most of us, that's exactly the reality for us, right? I mean, we can be told over and over and over again that we should reach for the stars, that we should, outdo ourselves, that we should push ourselves to these extremes, and that we should never settle. Well, but the truth is that's just kind of the way life is. We can't be superstars. We can't be these Marvel characters. We're plain, ordinary, broken, messed up, screwed up people. And so most of the time, the best that we can do is okay, adequate, average, and that's fine, because we're not called to be extraordinary. We're
This
just
is
called to be.
Yeah,
This is total blasphemy.
Yeah, Chad, I tend to hold to the words of the 20th century philosopher who said, "Keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars." So, call me old-fashioned, but isn't there room?
What he's saying is that isn't old-fashioned. That's new thinking, man.
I'm just saying, isn't there room to be quietly awesome?
Just like you, Matt.
I mean, I don't have a shot at being awesome. I'm just saying, in theory, is it possible?
And speaking of that, I don't want my surgeon to read your book.
Steve, I'm a simple man. I'm holding this wrong. Okay, no, this is probably going to be okay.
I'll be perfectly adequate.
Yeah, I'm an adequate doctor for some things.
But the whole approach of this thing is brilliant, because it's just kind of the upside down view of God. What we view as to be avoided at all costs really is the toolbox of God to create real change. The whole thing of failures, bringing you to the end of what you thought you were bringing to the table. But is there any way that He could do it less dramatically? Do I actually have to walk on my face to? I know what the answer to that is.
Yeah. The funny thing is, if you look at the scriptures, it's like God goes out of His way to make sure that He chooses people who are not even adequate for the task. I mean, it doesn't matter if we're talking about Moses redeeming the Israelites, or if we're talking about Jonah sent to the city of Nineveh. I mean, the whole thing is just a comedy. That's basically the story of the Old Testament. I mean, it's sort of gallows humor half the time, but it is a comedy, because we have God just choosing these outlandishly ridiculous people to do these outlandishly ridiculous things, and somehow in the end He pulls it off. And it's like he's trying to make it as blatant as possible for us to realize exactly that, hey, this is the way that I work. I don't have an HR department working for me, so I'm going to choose people who are seemingly unfit for the task at hand in order to demonstrate that actually, when it gets done, I'm the one getting it done and not these folks.
So you're saying we do have this in earthen clays and jars and stuff, and then God gets the credit.
I don't like that either.
I don't either, man. As soon as I preach a sermon, I want people to come to the door and tell me how wonderful I am. And if they don't, I'm going to have a terrible Monday. I want you to know that.
Steve, you were wonderful on Sunday.
I thank you. You guys. The name of the book is Upside Down Spirituality, 9 Essential Failures of a Faithful Life. I know you're thinking, I ain't getting this book. I don't need, this is such a freeing book. You need to read it. We'll be back. Don't go away. Did you know there are 9 essential failures? I know because I've read the book, but I also know that it's a checklist. I went down it, and I'm cool.
Oh, my.
I keep thinking there's 9 essential failures, and they're all on this program.
Yeah, right.
It's true.
Okay, so the 2 big failures in my life that just broke me are
Are you
one,
going to push your book again?
The Seed, a true myth.
One-
You can get it at keylife.org.
my book.
He obviously has not died, has not been crucified with Christ.
Yeah, talk about ambition.
Trying to keep the book from being one of the 9 failures.
So, yeah, okay, the book, and then the big one, being a parent, especially parent of teenagers. I was not prepared for, and I don't know why I wasn't. I should have been, I was not prepared to realize how horrible I am as a parent. I mean, I really thought that I could parent them out of being human. I really did. I mean, that sounds so insane and stupid, but I really thought I could be such a good parent that I would spare them the pain of life.
Yeah.
And one, where the heck did I get that idea? And 2, help me out, because you have a chapter in your book about failure as a parent, super moms, uber dads, and other people who don't exist.
Yeah, this one was hard to write, actually, because I'm with you. I look back on my parenting and the things that I've subjected my children to, and oh my goodness, it just it tears me apart. And I think almost every parent is like that. We carry around these suitcases of guilt because of all the various ways in which we have not been the parents that we wanted to be, and or grandparents, or whatever the case may be. So, but I think part of what's going on there is not just our failure to be good parents or adequate parents, even, but simply we have this guilt and this shame because we haven't lived up to a lot of what society tells us parents should be, in which parents, these days, if you want to be a successful parent in the eyes of the world, basically you can't be human. You have to be a god. You have to, provide every single aspect of meaning and significance and safety and importance to your children, and nobody can carry it off because it just, we're human. We're not divine, and so we can never live up to those. So we're dealing not only with like obvious failures as parents, we're also dealing with this at least perceived failures in the eyes of the world. So you got to get that double guilt that we're dragging around. But the message that I want to give primarily in that chapter is that the main thing that we can pass on to our kids is showing mercy, showing grace, and being vulnerable ourselves and admitting our mistakes. And when they screw up, to show them grace and mercy, because that's a pretty rare commodity in this world. So the more that we can demonstrate that to our own kids, then actually the more Christ-like we're going to be, because that's how same way that he deals with us.
I know you're familiar with David's law, but he and some others, but he says it really well, that this isn't just a Christian problem. It's a problem for pagans and unbelievers and Buddhists and everybody else, because we live in a culture that's a culture of law. It's a culture, I was thinking when you were asking about parenting, I mean, your neighbor who doesn't know Jesus has the same guilt you have. And that's why the message that Chad has about God's grace is so refreshing. And instead of teaching that and seeing a genuine awakening, because we have refreshing news, we do just the opposite.
As the non-parent in the room, it seems to me, after more years than I care to admit, and watching parents, especially those who have come into the grace circle, or whatever you want to call it, those who really want to understand grace, who want to exhibit that to their children, maybe that was not exhibited to them as kids. There is a fine line, or maybe it's not even very fine, but there's a line between demonstrating grace to your children and yet at the same time holding them accountable to the things that are essential to being obedient to what you think is important for them, what you've taught them. And we're coming up on a break, so we may have to go to the other side of that. But I watch people. It seems to me like the people that I know best are people who struggle with that all the time. How do I demonstrate grace and forgiveness that I've received from God to my children when there's this blatant non-gracious spirit going on?
Right. I think I show my kids a lot of grace for a long time, and then I explode.
And then you explode.
Right?
Yeah, that's right.
And I hate that. I can't.
I'm going to flood the world.
I am the most gracious parent you know. How can you treat me like this?
Yeah. I remember at a certain point, I told my oldest daughter, I was like, all that stuff I've been telling you for years about grace? Forget it. It is over.
The law is here.
It is over. The hammer is coming down.
Yeah.
We have a counselor friend by the name of Lottie Hilliard, and I asked her one time, how do you father? And she said, you look at how God has fathered you. I mean, his love is unconditional, but he isn't going to allow you to get away with that. I mean, he's going to whack you upside the head on occasion. The difference between him and us is that he's right and Erik's wrong. We're coming back. Hey, thanks for hanging out with us on Steve Brown, etc. We're talking to Chad Bird. You can read more from him at chadbird.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at BirdChadLewis.
Huh?
What?
I don't know.
I think we just learned his middle name. Is that right, Chad?
Where'd you get the Lewis, Chad?
Yeah, that's my middle name. So my email address is very similar, and if I had $1 for every time someone has misread that as Bird Chatalicious, I would be a rich man.
Oh, I like that.
Listen, Chad, it could be worse than that. Trust me.
Yeah, that's my stage name anyway.
Chad, your answer to my question was interrupted by all the poor parents around the table.
I'm sorry.
But anyway, I mean, there's a sense in which we were talking about it during the break. If you go to the dentist, you want somebody that knows what they're doing. I mean, there's a right way and a wrong way to do stuff with a car mechanic, all that kind of stuff. But, if you really are trying to be intentional about grace with your children, you really do want to demonstrate, I would think, the kind of loving kindness and forgiveness that God demonstrates, where at the same time, there is an accountability factor. And so there's this line that, that you have to draw. And I think that that's what I see over the years parents struggling with.
Yeah, I fully agree. My mom exemplified that really well for me when I was a young teenager. I tell this story in that particular chapter. I'd been over to a friend's house, and his dad had a Playboy subscription. And while I was over there, I stole one of the Playboys and I snuck it home, and I hid it in my room. And my mom found it, unbeknownst to me.
I wouldn't be here if that happened to me.
Yeah, well, I got home from school, and she said, sit down. So I sat down, and she sat down beside me, and the first words out of her mouth were, "I found your book."
Oh.
Now, it took me a second to connect what she was talking about with the magazine, but as soon as I made that connection, I'm sure that my face turned 3 shades of red, and I just wanted to crawl underneath the covers of the couch. But she went on to talk to me in a very stern sort of way about how this was not going to be permitted in her household. But then at the end, she showed mercy. She forgave me, and probably the greatest mercy she showed me is she didn't tell my dad.
Wow.
which I don't think he found out for years afterward. But I thought that was I've thought about that episode many times over the years, and how that was just a great combination of, law and grace, basically. So she was clear about discipline. She was clear about what was wrong and what was not going to be accepted. But when it was obvious that I felt terrible because of what I'd done, then she gave me grace, she gave me mercy, and that was it. She never brought it up again. So I think that kind of approach to parenting is applicable across the board if we really wanted to be driven by mercy, but at the same time to have rules, to have discipline. There has to be I wouldn't say there has to be a balance of both, because I don't really think it's 50-50, but you can't have really one without the other.
There's another school of thought that says you should have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 children and then just play the odds. And mathematically, one of them has got to turn out okay. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's the Vegas approach to parenting.
That's Zach's game.
Hey,
Zach, you have the best shot at this of anybody.
It's really more about retirement for me. One of them's got to make it.
There's
big.
a doctor in there
One
somewhere.
of them's got to be ambitious.
Yes, that's right. Don't read this book, children.
So, Chad, you're kind of referencing, and I think it's probably a good thing, but as long as you don't go neurotic and crazy on it, and most Christians do, there is a third use of the law, and it references things that are right and things that are wrong, places to go and places not to go, and it doesn't mean that we're going to obey it. That's the point. But it does mean that we ought to know it. And your mom referenced the third use of the law. Would you like to comment on that, or just say bull?
No, actually, I would comment it by using a quote from G.K. Chesterton that I think, Steve, that I lifted from something that you have written as well. It's I can't quote it exactly, but it's something along the lines of Christianity has established a certain rule and order, but the purpose is really to set that up so that the good things can run wild. Mm. And I've always clung to that particular understanding that, there is a certain rule and a certain order that is set up. You can call it the third use, you can call it whatever you'd like, but there's parameters, there's certain rule and order that is part of the faith. But the real purpose of that is so that within this rule and order, the good things can run wild, so that we can live in the freedom by which Christ has set us free. And that freedom is driven by the grace and mercy that we receive in Christ. It's not driven by the rule and the order, but rather by the love that's been poured into us from Christ.
Good things running wild pretty much describes all of my children, but not unrelated to your chapter on parenting. You have another chapter that speaks to marriage and how, surprise, surprise, we get that stuff wrong too. Care to can you unpack that a little bit about how we have those things upside down in the wrong way?
Yeah, this chapter was largely inspired by that famous quote by Dietrich Bonhoeffer that love will not sustain your marriage, but marriage will sustain your love. It's the idea that, of course, in every marriage, after about 2 weeks, things start to go south. There's immediately after that, when the afterglow has passed. Yeah, when the ethical is passed, of course, there's going to be issues because he doesn't do what she wants or she doesn't do what he wants, and you stick two people together in the same house, you're always going to have problems. And if there's nothing really that's binding them together, well, it's easy for them just to split up and go their separate ways. But what marriage does is it's basically a God-created house in which these two people are placed to live. They don't buy a marriage from IKEA and put it together themselves. They're put into something that God himself has created, which is there to sustain those times when love grows weak or basically non-existent, so that in the end it's going to be God's creation and God's order and God's gift, which is going to have any hope of sustaining the marriage, but it's not going to be what the people themselves are able to generate within themselves that keep that marriage going. So it's a very, again, upside down way of looking at marriage from the perspective of the world, where, of course, marriage is all about you and your passion and your love and finding a soulmate and all that other kind of BS. Not to put too fine a point
That's
on
cool.
it.
I told him I could add beeps later.
Chad, we're out of time. You are such a freeing person. This is a great book for a small group. It generated conversation here all over the place, and it will. The name of it is Upside Down Spirituality, 9 Essential Failures of a Faithful Life. Chad, you get 3 free sins for being with us, and we hope we can do it again. You keep writing these books.
I will. Thank you, Steve. Thanks, everyone, for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Guys, we're out of here, but we're going to come back, and the final 2 or 3 minutes of this broadcast is often the finest, most sterling, most profound. Don't miss it. There's an increasing awareness in things that are being written by thoughtful authors like Chad Bird and a bunch of others that are finally coming out and saying things that all of us hoped might be true. We prayed might be true, but we didn't think they were true because nobody believed they were true. And all of a sudden, people are saying it. And all of a sudden, I'm feeling free. And you will too. The Christian faith is counterintuitive. Everything that you experience tells you that if you obey the rules, your teacher and God will like you better. And if you obey the laws, the policeman and God will like you better. Guys, that's a lie. And it really is. And the scripture is filled with it. Every page is filled with a God who loves his people not to let them get away with arrogance, with having others worship at their altar, at doing it right. I mean, a bunch of ragamuffins in Scripture. And Chad said it was in the Old Testament. It didn't get any better in the New Testament. I mean, read Romans 7 and what Paul said about himself. I wouldn't have said that. I'd have lost my job. Or you can see church fights. Man, they make every church fight you've been in look like a Sunday school picnic. I mean, the two greatest leaders in the church wouldn't even speak to each other for years. And so all of a sudden you begin to think, Lord, what are you trying to do here? What he's trying to do is to show you that he really loves you. And it's not because of what you do, or how bright you are, or how faithful you are, or how obedient you. He just loves you. And there's something unreasonable about that kind of love. All right. Kathy, who's going to be here next week?
Michael Card. We've had Michael on a number of times, at least 4 times in the past, because every time he did a new commentary on one of the Gospels, we had him on, and he's one of our favorites, and he's a great musician. I'm sure everybody knows that back gazillions of years ago, he wrote El Shaddai, which of course is, was just so popular for so long. But anyway, Michael has a new book out called Inexpressible Hesed and the Mystery of God's Loving Kindness. And I actually, because I'm illiterate, looked up Hesed, and that's a Hebrew word that talks about describes the character of God. So I think it's going to be a good time.
Really well. He's always irritating. You shouldn't be able to sing and write. I mean, God ought to give you one gift. And I've told God that one is enough. I got to go. I'm irritated, and I'm going to ruin this. Hey, join us next week, same time, same place. Between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't, and that gives you a wide, wide berth.